The antiseptic stench of the infirmary clawed at Lennox Elridge's nostrils as he swung his legs off the cot. His right side burned, a dull, thudding pain just under the rib cage where the stitches pulled every time he moved. He didn't remember much of the accident, just a high-pitched alarm, a wall of steam, and then the weight of something slamming into his side. He winced as he straightened up. The lights in the medical bay were soft, filtered through some kind of atmosphere-adapting gel that gave everything a faint blue tint. Across the room, a tall, green-skinned alien named Jarl watched him silently. "You should be resting," Jarl said. His thin arms folded over his chest, and his eyes horizontal slits that adjusted with the light narrowed. Dr. Varn said no movement for 2 full rotations. "I've been lying there for 2 days, Lennox muttered. "And it's not going to heal right if I don't clean it properly." Jarl tilted his head. "The wound is sealed, the stitches are intact." "The data suggests." "Yeah, your data doesn't account for human tissue rejecting synthetic thread after a couple days." Lennox grabbed the surgical kit off the wall shelf. "If I don't remove these now, it's going to get infected." Jarl stepped forward. "The instruments are sterilized, but I know what I'm doing." Jarl hesitated, then backed off. "You have an unusual definition of healing." Lennox sat back down, peeled back the bandage slowly, and hissed. The skin was red and angry, and the line of stitches, ridged and tight, was clearly inflamed. He took a breath, then reached for the extractor. The door hissed open. 2 more students entered, both from the Zentari quadrant. Their tall, translucent forms shimmered faintly, almost like jellyfish with bones. They paused mid-step. "What is he doing?" one asked, voice high and warbling. "He's removing the stitches," Jarl replied. The taller of the 2 gasped. "But that's a surgical violation." "That's not permitted without." Lennox glanced their way, the extractor poised at the edge of his skin. "Time to heal properly." He bit down on a folded cloth and began pulling the first stitch. The alien students recoiled, one covering its face with a long, webbed hand. Lennox pressed through the pain, sweat beading on his forehead. Each tug was a burn, but he could feel the relief already, the pressure easing, the throbbing dulling. After the 5th stitch, he paused to breathe. "You're going to rupture something," Jarl said, pacing now. "This is not standard procedure. You should have requested." "Your doctor stitched human skin like it was a shorn membrane," Lennox snapped. "We don't heal in layers, we regenerate from the bottom up." He kept going, one after the other, until the last of the black thread lay in a sterile tray. He cleaned the wound with a saline pad, then applied a human-specific antibiotic cream from his personal medkit. The room was silent. Jarl broke it. "You could have waited." "I didn't come here to get patched up by someone who's never seen a human operate." Lennox stood slowly, clutching his side. "We're not made of gel. You seal us wrong, we fester." The next few days were quiet. Word had spread through the Interspecies Academy faster than Lennox could limp to the dining hall. Students stared openly. Some avoided him altogether. Others tried to ask questions he couldn't answer without getting frustrated. Professor Harneth, a tall, amphibious creature with a flowing robe and a fondness for throwing chalk, called him out in front of the class. "Mr. Elridge, your medical escapade has caused quite a stir. Care to explain the logic behind self-surgery?" Lennox shifted in his seat. "Didn't want a secondary infection, and yet you risked tearing internal tissue." "I knew what I was doing." "By what training?" He hesitated. "My cousin was a combat medic, taught me a few things." Harneth turned to the class. "Let us consider this. Humans' flesh-based bipeds require healing from the inside out. What does this mean for our understanding of interspecies medical compatibility?" A clawed hand went up. It belonged to Cernak, a reptilian student with a habit of blinking both sets of eyelids at once. "It means we can't assume our techniques work on all species, even if the wounds look similar." "Correct, and it also means that perhaps we've underestimated the human tolerance for pain." Lennox looked down at his notebook. He'd stopped writing halfway through the lecture. every movement still sent a twinge through his side. By the end of the week, he was called into the infirmary again. Dr. Varn, a thick-bodied Dolari with 4 arms and a single glowing eye, stood waiting. "Sit," the doctor said, pointing to the exam table. Lennox obeyed. "You removed the stitches. They were inflaming the wound, and you didn't inform me. You weren't listening when I told you it was healing wrong." Dr. Varn scanned the wound with a hovering lens. Inflammation reduced, tissue regeneration accelerated. "No signs of infection." Lennox raised an eyebrow. "You were correct, this time." "I wasn't guessing," Varn grunted. "We will adjust our protocols for human biology, but next time you come to me first." Lennox nodded. "Fair." Outside the medbay, Jarl waited. "I told you it was reckless," Jarl said. "I know." "But you were right," Lennox shrugged. "Doesn't make it less reckless." Jarl fell into step beside him. "I've been assigned to your xenobiology project group." "Great, you're gonna dissect me while I sleep." "No." "But I might ask to scan your organs." Lennox laughed, then winced and held his side. "Let's not do that right away." In the following weeks, things began to shift. The whispers turned into questions. The stares turned into fascination. Cernak stopped him in the hallway. "Is it true you can survive having your arm broken and still function?" "I wouldn't call it functioning," Lennox said. "More like surviving badly." Another student, a small, feathered being named Trolley, asked to see his scar. "Just for a research sketch," she insisted. Lennox sighed and lifted his shirt slightly. She gasped. "It's jagged." "Yeah, that's what happens when someone stitches you like you're a sea sponge." Back in class, Professor Harnath began using him as a case study. "Mr. Elridge continues to demonstrate an unusual threshold for trauma." "Let's discuss the implication of pain management across species." "I'm right here," Lennox muttered. "You're an exemplar now," Harnath replied. "Live with it." Somehow, being the human who pulled his own stitches turned into a kind of legend. Not a heroic one, but a cautionary tale wrapped in amazement. Still, Lennox didn't mind. At least now, they asked before trying to treat him like a gelatinous blob in a pressure sleeve. And his side, it healed. Slowly. Properly. 3 days after the stitches incident, Lennox found himself elbow-deep in a containment hatch on Deck 6, trying to reroute coolant flow before the entire auxiliary system shut down. His side still ached whenever he leaned too far, but the inflammation had gone down enough that he could crouch without gritting his teeth. The Academy's maintenance division had sent him the work order with a note that read, "Human flexibility may assist where Dolari limbs cannot." "Flexibility," he muttered, wedging his shoulder between 2 coolant lines. "They mean I'm the only one dumb enough to crawl in here." A faint clatter echoed behind him. He twisted around and caught sight of a familiar shimmer, translucent limbs, and that slow, fluid step that meant only one thing. "Trolley," he said, voice muffled by the hatch. "If you're here for another sketch, I'm charging this time." "I'm not sketching," she said, her feathers puffing slightly in amusement. "I was told this unit needs recalibration. I volunteered." "Well, that's a first, you volunteering." "I was curious." "You've been assigned 3 environmental repair jobs since the injury. Most would request rest or reassignment," he grunted. "I requested to be kept busy." "Why?" "Because if I sit still too long, I start thinking about how much it hurts." She tilted her head, crest feathers shifting. "That is an inefficient coping mechanism." "It's a human one. We don't always do efficient. Sometimes we just do what works. You should allow your tissues to rest." "I know. But the systems don't stop needing fixing because I'm sore." She watched as he twisted a valve connector, fingers blackened with sealant. Her gaze moved to his side where the scar peeked out just under the hem of his shirt. "It's healing unevenly," she noted. "It'll even out. You don't have any regenerative aids." "I do, but I react weird to half your serums. My immune system treats them like an intruder and goes full scorched earth." She crouched beside the hatch. "That explains why you didn't accept Dr. Varn's biogel treatment." "Yeah." Last time I tried it, I got fever sweats and hallucinated my grandmother yelling at me in Portuguese for 6 hours. Trolley blinked slowly. I cannot tell if that is exaggeration. I wish it was. She passed him a spanner without being asked. He took it and adjusted the pressure ring with a practiced flick. You learn fast, she said. I've had to. We don't have built-in knowledge banks or Hive-linked recall. We just wing it until we get it right. That sounds dangerous. It is. He slid out of the hatch halfway, wiping his hands on a rag. But it's kind of what we're good at. Trolley nodded once, a gesture she'd picked up from observing him. You adapt, exactly, even when it's unsafe, especially then. A sudden chirp from her comm band cut the moment short. She glanced at it, feathers tightening. There's a xenomedical workshop in Upper Lab 4, she said after a pause. They're doing live simulations. They want volunteers for comparative species procedures. Lennox gave her a look. Comparative how? They want to observe different healing responses to minor incisions. He narrowed his eyes. You mean they want to poke holes in us and see how fast we patch up? It's controlled. Still sounds like a weird science fair. You could decline. He stood up, brushing off his overalls. No, I'll do it, she stared. Why? Because if they're gonna study us, I'd rather they do it with someone who knows what to expect. Better me than someone who doesn't know what they're signing up for. Trolley offered nothing in response, but followed him back through the corridor, her silence more thoughtful than reluctant. 3 hours later, Lennox sat on a padded table under the bright lights of Lab 4, surrounded by a half-circle of students, instructors, and one very nervous-looking medical technician who seemed unsure where to place the scalpel. You do realize I've done this before, right? Lennox said, rolling up his sleeve. Just make a clean cut and don't nick anything vital. The technician, a squat, blue-skinned Iraqi with trembling fingers, looked up. You are confident. I'm also the one with the skin on the line. Literally? Professor Renthar, who presided over the procedure, cleared her throat or whatever passed for one in her species, which sounded more like a kettle starting to boil. Today we observe how a human dermal layer reacts to a controlled incision of 2 centimeters. The wound will not be closed artificially. We will monitor clotting, inflammation, and pain response. Lennox nodded. Let's get it over with. The blade touched down, and he felt the sting like a thin, sharp wire dragging through skin. He grunted but didn't flinch. Blood welled quickly, a dark red line that pressed upward before the technician dabbed it with a sterile pad. A ripple of murmurs passed through the observers. Rapid vasoconstriction, someone noted. Epidermal response is immediate, another added. Lennox raised an eyebrow. You're all talking like I'm not sitting here bleeding on your table. Renthar gestured to a thermal scanner. Core temperature holding, cortisol levels elevated but stable, no sedatives administered. Remarkable. Does it hurt? Asked a tall, scale-plated student from the far end. Of course it hurts, Lennox said, but it's not unbearable. Why not signal for blockage? Why not shut down the nociceptors? He shrugged. Because pain's useful, tells me I'm still alive, lets me know if something's wrong. A third-year student raised a bony hand. Wouldn't it be more logical to avoid pain altogether? Maybe. But avoiding it doesn't teach you how to deal with it. Renthar moved closer, inspecting the wound. Platelet response is more aggressive than anticipated. The clot is forming faster than in most Terran models. I drink a lot of water, Lennox said dryly. Fascinating. The technician began scanning the clot, but Lennox put a hand up. Let it breathe, don't smother it with tech. But we must document, you will. Just give it a minute. The group watched in near silence as the blood crusted into a dark scab, the skin around it puffing slightly but not spreading. Most of you heal by reabsorbing damaged matter, Lennox said. We seal it off, protect it, and build from underneath. It's slower. But it's ours. Someone whispered, it's primitive. He heard it, didn't flinch. Yeah, and it works. After they dismissed him, he stepped off the table, bandaged but unassisted. Trolley met him at the exit, her expression unreadable. You didn't have to volunteer for that. I know, You bled in front of 20 species. They need to see it. She hesitated. That's not healthy. Neither is ignorance. They walked back to the dorm levels in silence, passing a group of younger students who parted quickly at the sight of him. Later that night, he sat alone in the quad, the artificial stars above flickering in their default orbit pattern. His arm throbbed not sharp, just a dull echo of earlier. Jarl found him there carrying a small container. What's that? Lennox asked. A salve, not Dolari issue, synthesized from Terran-friendly compounds, no biogel. Lennox took it without a word, dabbed a bit on the scab, cool, minty. Immediate relief. Jarl sat beside him. They're talking about creating a human-specific track in the xenomedical curriculum. Because of the stitches, because of everything, Lennox leaned back, eyes on the flickering stars. Guess bleeding on a lab table has its perks. Jarl didn't laugh, just nodded. You changed something. Lennox smiled faintly. Good, I'm tired of being treated like a science fair exhibit. You still are. Yeah. But now they ask first. The smell of sterilized metal and ozone clung to the inside of Lennox's nostrils as he stepped into Workshop Bay 7. Despite the lab's size, it felt cramped mostly due to the sheer number of observers lining the upper balconies. Word had gotten around again, and apparently, his previous involvement in the xenomedical session had earned him a reputation as something between a living demonstration and a curiosity cabinet. I thought this was supposed to be a closed exercise, he muttered, pulling on a loose-fitting apron that barely reached his knees. You said you wanted to be busy, Jarl replied, adjusting a calibration scope. This qualifies. Lennox glanced at the steel table in front of him, where a synthetic tissue unit lay under the scanner. It pulsed every few seconds, an imitation of a humanoid circulatory rhythm. Not human, thankfully, but close enough to practice invasive techniques. He was paired with 2 other students for this session, both from species he hadn't worked with before. One of them, a quadrupedal being named Orin, had a long snout and 4 dexterous limbs ending in suction cup digits. The other, a pale, insectoid creature named Vel, clicked softly with every movement and had compound eyes that refracted light in a dozen miniature rainbows. Neither of them acknowledged him when he stepped up to the table. Lennox broke the silence. You 2 done studying me like I'm gonna molt? I was analyzing your posture, Vel replied. It is asymmetrical, likely a result of your recent trauma. You could have just asked if my side still hurts. I assumed you preferred data to sympathy. Orin didn't look up. We were told to wait for your lead. You were told wrong. I'm not in charge. You're the only one here with experience handling live bleeding response under pressure. Lennox exhaled through his nose. That doesn't make me qualified. It makes me the idiot who didn't wait for the med team. Still, Vel said, adjusting the surgical lamp, you've demonstrated initiative and tolerance for pain exceeding baseline expectation. Great, I'm the Academy's favorite pain sponge. Orin finally turned toward him. You are not favored. You are unpredictable, that makes you valuable, comforting. The synthetic unit beeped twice, indicating readiness. Vel passed a sterile blade to Lennox. Incision along the upper artery junction, standard depth. He took the blade, hand steady, and made the cut. Red fluid, not blood, but a close approximation, began to pulse from the opening. The tissue reacted, curling slightly at the edges, just like a real wound. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Orin leaned in. Clamp. Lennox handed it over, watching as the creature's suctioned fingers pinched the artery closed. Vel followed with a tissue stabilizer on the opposite side. Sealant? Lennox asked. Vel hesitated. I want to test something. Before either of them could protest, she pressed a different compound over the wound, one not listed in the initial procedure. The fluid hissed and bubbled as it interacted with the synthetic tissue, creating a thin, translucent film. That's not standard, Lennox said. It's a variant used in my species. It bonds with protein chains instead of collagen. Orin tilted his head. Human tissue uses collagen. That won't hold. Exactly, Vel replied. I want to observe the rejection process. Lennox stared at her. You want to make the wound worse? I want to understand incompatibility. He stepped back. I'm not doing this if you're deliberately sabotaging the treatment. It's synthetic. There's no risk. He gestured at the table. There's no learning either if you're just trying to prove what already doesn't work. Vel clicked her mandibles once, then removed the sealant with a solvent. Your reaction is noted. Good. They finished the session in silence, each taking turns closing different segments of the artificial wound. By the end, the synthetic skin looked like a patchwork quilt, each corner sealed using a different method. Some smooth, some puckered, one even slightly lopsided. Lennox peeled off his gloves and tossed them into the waste chute. That was more chaotic than it needed to be. You still finished faster than the other teams, Jarl said from the observation station, and your closure held the longest under pressure. That doesn't mean I want to do this again. You won't. Jarl handed him a small scanner. You're scheduled for a full musculoskeletal scan tomorrow. Voluntary, but they want baseline data for human healing rates. Lennox groaned. Why do I feel like I'm becoming a walking syllabus? Because you are. He slumped onto the nearest bench, rubbing the back of his neck. At least let me get lunch before I'm dissected again. Not dissected, just scanned. Semantics. 3 hours later, after a lunch that involved something suspiciously green and definitely not from Earth, Lennox found himself in one of the Academy's research wings. The scanning room was small, hexagonal, and lined with padded panels that hummed softly whenever the machine powered on. A single technician, a wide, flat creature with 6 eyes and limbs like braided rope, stood at the control console. Remove your shirt, it said without looking up. Lennox complied, folding the fabric neatly on a side table. Any implants? No. Previous fractures. Left forearm 2 years ago. Hairline rib crack last month. Scar tissue present? Plenty. The scanner descended from the ceiling, a ringed structure that glowed faintly as it adjusted to his body's dimensions. A low hum filled the chamber. Remain still. The scan began, sweeping from his shoulders to his waist. The technician studied the readings as they appeared. You have accelerated dermal regeneration, it said after a moment. I hydrate, and I don't smoke. This is not typical. Your tissue density is also higher than expected, probably from carrying heavy tools. And running late, the technician paused. You are not what we expected. Neither are most things. The scan completed with a soft chime. Lennox pulled his shirt back on, wincing slightly as the collar brushed against his healing side. You are cleared, the technician said. Results will be integrated into the human profile database. Do I get a copy? Request through the medical wing. He stepped out into the corridor, blinking against the brighter lights. Trolley stood a few meters away, holding a data tablet. You were in there for 20 minutes. They were probably confused by my lack of tentacles. She held up the tablet. They're adding a human-specific emergency protocol to the Academy's standard procedures. He paused. For what? Bleeding, collapse, respiratory trauma. They didn't have one before. That's comforting. They're naming it the Elridge protocol. He stared at her. You're joking. I'm not. He leaned against the wall. Fantastic. I rip out a few stitches, and now I'm a medical precedent. You're more than that, she said, watching him carefully. You made them rethink how they prepare for things they don't understand. Well, he said, standing upright again, I guess that's something. It is. They walked toward the dorm halls, the corridor quiet except for the low thrum of the ship's environmental systems. At the entrance, Jarl was waiting with a small container. What now? Lennox asked. No scans, no procedures, just something I synthesized. He handed over the container. A salve from Earth-compatible plants should help with the scar. Lennox opened it, sniffed, and nodded. Smells like mint and regret. Jarl tilted his head. That was not intentional, he laughed, just once. Thanks. As the three of them stood in the hallway, the Academy's intercom buzzed with a brief announcement. New protocol uploaded. Elridge response now active in all medical subroutines. Lennox exhaled slowly. Guess it's official. Trolley looked at him. Do you regret doing it? He thought for a second. No, but next time I'd prefer they name a salad after me instead. Jarl blinked. A salad? Never mind. And with that, they headed back inside, the door sliding shut behind them.